Welcome, my darling wanderer, to another chapter of Echoes of the Dark. I am Violet Nocturne, your guide through the labyrinth of nightmares, your confidant in the shadowed corners of the soul. Tonight, we weave a tale sown in shadows, hidden, buried truths that no light dares to reveal. As we traverse this chilling narrative together, ask yourself, how far would you go to unearth a secret, and what would it cost you to know it? Our story begins in an unassuming suburb where white picket fences and manicured lawns veil the underbelly of secrets. A young woman named Emily finds herself the unwilling heir to her late grandmother's curious estate. At first glance, the house is old but charming, with ivy creeping across the brick like skeletal fingers. Yet, it's the garden that captivates Emily, a peculiar patch of land encased by a wrought iron fence. In its center stands an ancient scarecrow, rotting and weathered, its hollow eyes watching. But you feel the pull already, don't you? The garden whispers of mystery, and Emily, curious to a fault, can't resist. Neither could you, my dear. The scarecrow is adorned with symbols carved into withered bark and fabric stitched in patterns that don't belong to this world. Each night, Emily swears she hears it groan, a low creak carried by the wind. She chalks it up to tired nerves and the unrest of mourning. But deep down, she knows. She knows something isn't right. One day, Emily unearths an old journal in her grandmother's study. The pages are yellowed, the ink smudged with time, yet the entries are vivid tales of rituals performed in that very garden. Rituals of binding and banishment, of sealing something unspeakable beneath the soil. Her heart races as she reads. To disturb the earth is to wake the shadows. To wake the shadows is to invite them in. Still, isn't it temptation itself to slog through the muck of forbidden knowledge? Emily begins digging, not just through the journal, but in the garden itself. Can you blame her? Humans are creatures of insatiable curiosity, coaxed by the promise of revelation, blinded to the price. With each thrust of the spade, the air grows heavier. The smell of decay rises, sweet and cloying. Her breathing quickens. The scarecrow, unmoving, seems to loom closer, as if it leans into her efforts. And then, after hours of digging, her spade strikes something not quite stone, not quite wood. She pulls it from the soil, a small box, bound tightly with coarse twine, its surface etched in uneasy symbols that seem to squirm under her gaze. Inside is a collection of what appear to be trinkets, a lock of hair, brittle and gray, yellowed teeth, and what can only be described as fragments of a doll, though the eyes are unsettlingly lifelike. My darling, would you open such a box? Would you risk knowing? Because Emily, unfortunately for her, did. The moment she unsealed the box, the garden seemed to breathe. The air grew frigid. Shadows from nowhere began to slither toward her, elongated fingers of darkness stretching over the land. The journal's warning echoed in her head, but it was too late. She had disturbed the earth. She had wakened the shadows. That night, Emily locked herself within the safety of the house. But safety is a cruel illusion, isn't it? Scratching sounds, faint and distant, became increasingly audible. She swore she saw figures darting just beyond the windows. And then, a voice. A gravelly whisper, ancient and cold, calling her name, calling her back to the garden. Compelled as if tethered by invisible strings, Emily found herself outside, standing before the scarecrow under the guise of moonlight. The box was in her hands. She couldn't remember bringing it. And then, the scarecrow moved. Its lifeless head twisted toward her, the hollow emptiness in its eyes now filled with something alive, something malignant. It spoke, but not in words. A low vibration felt in her very bones. The bindings had held it prisoner, it explained. Out of desperation, Her grandmother had imprisoned not a beast, but an old god. One who had been feeding on her family for centuries. One who now wanted vengeance. Darling, there is no storyteller crueler than fate. Emily dropped the box, her body trembling as the scarecrow stretched its arms, pulling itself free from its bindings. And then, silence. What happened next is for you to decide. Maybe the scarecrow claimed Emily for its own. Maybe she escaped, only to find herself haunted by her awakening of the shadows for the rest of her days. Or maybe she became something else entirely. Ensnared, possessed, just another echo in the dark. And so, my darling listeners, remember this. Some secrets are meant to remain buried. Not all knowledge is power. Some truths aren't freedom. They're a curse. Consider that the next time you feel the urge to turn over the soil of a mystery. Until we meet again, keep the lights on, and keep your curiosity in check. After all, you wouldn't want to wake something that prefers to rest in shadows, would you? Sweet dreams. Or perhaps, nightmares.